Welcome, Team Rhino. It's May and IRF is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And as part of those events, we're talking to people about the past, present, and future of IRF activities around the world. Today, I have as my guest Raoul du Toit. He is the Senior African Rhino Program Advisor for IRF. And he's also the founder of the Raoul Rhino Trust in Zimbabwe. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. And your happy 30th anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a great month of activities, and they're going to continue all month long. We're happy to speak to you today and get an idea of where things are at in Zimbabwe. As some of our viewers already have seen, IRF began as the International Rhino Black Foundation by supporting some activities in Zimbabwe, and has grown through the efforts of the supporting the Raoul Rhino Trust, additional activities and programs, and is still committed to protecting rhinos in Zimbabwe. So let's get started by asking you, why is Zimbabwe important for rhinos? Or why are rhinos important for Zimbabwe, I should say?
Okay. Right, as you say, IRF's had a long-term background here, and we're very grateful to IRF and to the donors behind IRF for that. And that effort has allowed us to create large viable populations. I think it's very important to note that it's not just the aggregate total of rhinos in a country that makes a country an important range state, but it's also the question of whether those rhinos are grouped into adequately viable populations, large viable populations. And there is a categorization of populations in Africa that goes from key populations to important populations to less important populations. And the key populations are the ones over 100 that are showing positive rates of growth. And there actually aren't that many key populations of black rhinos in Africa. There are around 13 of them in the whole of Africa, which is not very many. There are only 3 in South Africa, for instance, 2 in Namibia. But Zimbabwe's got 3 of these key populations, which have been built up very much through IRF support in our low-veld region. So we've got some of Africa's largest populations, although in terms of the national total of rhinos, we are the 4th most important range state. A country like South Africa has got more black rhinos, but they're more spread out, and they don't have as many aggregated populations. And one of the key things people need to understand is that trying to conserve rhinos in dribs and drabs is not a good idea. You run into inbreeding problems. You lose economies of scale that come with the protection effort. And when you do have poaching, which is inevitable, unfortunately, you will always have some degree of poaching attrition. The large populations can take knocks and recover from them, as we've had it happen several times in the low-veld. We've had devastating poaching at times, but the populations are big enough that they can take those knocks and rebuild. So really what makes Zimbabwe important is those important rhino populations, 3 of them, with a long record of building private sector involvement and investment in helping maintain the land on which the rhinos are being protected with external support. But we need space for the rhinos, and if that land is being managed in partnerships with the private sector, we can be assured of long-term, efficient, committed joint effort and teamwork to look after them. So I think Zimbabwe's, it's one of the 4 big range states in Africa, and I think important in that regard.
And you mentioned to me that, protecting rhinos is not just about protecting rhinos. Could you talk a little bit about what that means?
Absolutely. I mean, a person like myself, I'm not involved in rhino conservation just because I love rhinos, although I do have a lot of liking and respect for rhinos. They're much more complex animals than people appreciate. So it's not just that. It's also because if you protect rhinos and you create the space that they need, particularly black rhinos, they need a lot of space for their social interactions and their normal breeding behavior, etc., and their ecology. That area has to be protected against poachers and provided with basics like water supplies, etc. At the same time, you're conserving a very wide range of other biodiversity that comes along in that space. everything from, lions and leopards and cheetahs and wild dogs and those predators through to antelope of all kinds. So essentially they're umbrella species for a lot of other biodiversity. And if we take care of their needs, we concurrently taking care of the needs of a lot of other wildlife at the same time.
So what are the issues that are currently facing rhinos in Zimbabwe?
Well, obviously poaching is always there as a big issue. We have seen a reduction over the last couple of years in poaching. This year, our biggest conservancy, where we concentrate our joint IRF and low-fought rhino trust activity to a large extent, we haven't lost a single rhino. Whereas in the same period in 2019, we would have already lost, 15, 20 rhinos by now. So, that's very encouraging. The reasons for that are complicated. I'm quite sure the COVID issue has had something to do with it. In two respects, probably. One, in terms of disrupting the supply chains with a great reduction in the international flights out of Zimbabwe via a place like Dubai to Asia. There's been less opportunity for rhino horn to be smuggled out. It's partly due to, in my view, the fact that these poaching syndicates are not just involved in rhino horn trade, they're involved in all manner of illegal activity and smuggling. And right now in Zimbabwe, there's a great deal of gold smuggling happening. Zimbabwe's economically pretty collapsed, and a lot of the employment has shifted to the informal sector. And people working as small-scale gold miners in the informal sector are getting employment in that regard, even though it's pretty transient, pretty unpleasant employment. But there's work there, and that's generating a lot of gold that is getting smuggled out of the country. And whereas there is a common media myth that rhino horn is worth its weight in gold, it certainly isn't. It's not worth anything like the value of gold, certainly on the production side in the countries in Africa. So if there's opportunity to smuggle gold, that'll be taken as the preferential illegal activity rather than smuggling rhino horn. And that brings me on to another point, is there are some indications that the price of rhino horn has fallen in Asia. There have been some greater government controls in places like China as a consequence of cracking down on the trade in wildlife products.
So we're talking about the current issues that are facing Zimbabwe, and they've made strides with poaching. As Raoul mentioned, it is a very difficult and complex issue because of they've had a benefit of COVID, as well as COVID has had issues in reducing tourism dollars in other places. So it's both a blessing and a curse. But there are other issues facing rhinos in Zimbabwe in general. And Raoul, I wonder if you could go into some detail about some of those other issues besides poaching.
Sure. I mean, not just in Zimbabwe, but in other countries in the region, we do have a problem of economies that are rather weak, and the consequence of that is low rates of employment, which encourages people to move into illegal activities and makes it difficult to get things that we need, equipment, supplies, etc. So we always struggle with that, and it's particularly bad in Zimbabwe right now. The economy has, in financial terms, has stabilized somewhat since the country is running on US dollars at the moment, rather than its own national currency. So things are a bit calmer in that regard. And the massive rate of inflation that really made our lives difficult over recent periods is now kind of to some extent under control. So economic problems, the unemployment that pushes people into poaching, land pressure as people lose formal employment in industries, in urban centers. They will want to go back to the land and engage in smallholder farming, and that creates land pressure that impinges on our wildlife areas and creates those kind of problems. Bushmeat poaching, people seeking to trap animals for the meat. That can also then create problems for rhinos. With those same snares, you can catch rhinos, and even though you may not kill the rhino, you can cause some quite serious injury that requires us to respond to. So I think that those range of economic issues are pretty perennial, but they are big and regrettably always there.
It's also hard to find supplies, correct? And I know you have to constantly maintain trucks and planes and and everything to maintain your rhino operations work and your monitoring work. How's that been going?
Yeah, it's tough. It's very hard to get things done. I mean, our airplane needed attention. That was from the last rhino operation, which we finished in October last year. Only now is it back in action because we've been waiting for spares. And in fact, I've been interrupted by phone calls during this interview of the company that's working on it, because even though they take months to do the repair, they expect to get paid in hours, a matter of hours. So the whole business environment here is quite a difficult one to operate in. And what we do is we fall back on teamwork. You learn how to work with trusted suppliers, both within Zimbabwe and outside, how to get commodities sourced in South Africa and brought into Zimbabwe in the most efficient way possible, and essentially have to network for one's requirements on quite an intensive basis, and really fall back on teamwork.
And there's some exciting programs going on as well. I wonder if you could talk about some of the immediate plans that are happening right now in Zimbabwe.
Sure. Well, on the rhino side of things, what we're obviously trying to do is to grow rhinos and maintain these large, viable key populations, but also to create new ones that have got the potential to expand into becoming key populations. When you start a new population, you're obviously going to start with a fairly small number of rhinos, but you want to do that in an area where there's room for growth. And that area obviously has to also be secure. So after many years of effort, one of our national parks in southern Zimbabwe, Gonorrhea, is now ready to receive rhinos. There's been quite a lot of co-management financing going into Gonorrhea over the years, which has built up its infrastructure and its security, capacity, built its staff. And we did a very detailed feasibility study, which confirmed that, we now are not acting irresponsibly by moving some rhinos from our main rhino populations into that area to create a new population. So in June this year, we'll be moving 30 rhinos, black rhinos, into Gonorrhea National Park. That's quite a few more than normally get moved. Normally it's about 20 or even less. But rhinos are complicated animals socially, black rhinos particularly. And if you bring in rhinos one year and then bring a few more the year after and a few more the year after, the ones you brought initially would have established home ranges and will be very defensive of those against newcomers, and you get fighting and so on. So it's great to have this exciting opportunity to bring a whole bunch of rhinos in one go, release them in a new area under competent management with a level of security. We're never going to totally stop the poaching, as I said, but it's like, no risk, no gain. You have to put some rhinos in there, be reasonably confident that the poaching rate will be kept well below the rate of reproduction, and that overall you'll have growth. And I think we will have that there. So I think that's the most exciting thing that we've got immediately on the horizon. And thanks again to IRF and the donors behind IRF for helping us make that possible.
Thank you.
Although I should mention
all of the thank you to all of the efforts made by a number of different people to make that happen in Zimbabwe as well.
Absolutely. That again comes back to teamwork, is that the Gonorrhea project, as I said, is a co-management project. It's a joint venture between the Frankfurt Zoological Society and the national parks in Zimbabwe. And that joint effort is what's made it possible. We're providing a rhino-specific component of support that builds to that bigger picture. As I said before, rhinos have to be managed as integral parts of a bigger system. So that bigger system has been worked on, and now we can assist with the allocation of rhinos and do our side on the capture side of the animals, moving them in, being confident that they'll be well taken care of.
Yeah, I wonder if, and there are a lot of great things happening in Zimbabwe, along with all of those obstacles. And as you said, it's really been teamwork that has, overcome those obstacles. What do you see happening in the future for rhinos, particularly in Zimbabwe, but across Africa? And what do we need to do to get there?
Okay. Well, I think getting back to this point that I keep emphasizing, we need to find opportunities to build up rhinos into viable populations. So what we need to do is to have some sort of performance metric or indicator of what makes rhino population viability. What is a kind of a scoring of the of the importance of different populations that takes into account these issues of genetic diversity, numbers of animals that can breed and withstand poaching shocks and so on. And having come up with some sort of a metric, it's a bit like making an investment in a stock market. You look at the Dow Jones Industrial Index or whatever it is, and you look at, and you can track that over time and see how well your investment's going. Because doing rhino conservation is very much like investing. We're investing founder animals or rhinos, and we need to look for growth. So the big thing we need to do is to find a way, and we are working on this, through a lot of effort involving various people on really teasing out those conservation biology attributes for rhino population and reducing them to some sort of performance index, and then seeing where in Africa we can achieve growth in that index, and that in turn then comes back to the question of financing. For rhino conservation, we really need three main things. We need the rhinos. We need enough rhinos to breed with each other and build up and maintain genetic variability. We need management on the ground. We need competent people who, with some leadership ability, who can hold things together, like what's happening in Gonarezhou National Park. And we need funding. We need financing. Those are the three main things. Other things are just details, really. If we can get those three things in place, then we're going to win. So I think that what needs to be done in Zimbabwe and regionally is to find a way to identify where we're going to get the bang for the buck in terms of rhino growth, what the funding's required to do that, what is the buck that we need to be putting in there, and whether there's adequate management there, a bit like doing due diligence of a commercial investment. So we need to work as IRF with other organizations and really look very critically at those sites in Africa that might meet those criteria in the best possible way, and not waste our time on non-viable populations that are getting frittering away support that should really be concentrated.
Well, thank you for sharing that vision. I wonder if you'll share where so Raoul made time today out of his busy schedule. He's been working really, really hard with different rhino operations going on and different rhino planning meetings as well. Where are you off to after this?
Well, I'm going up to North Luangwa in Zambia. Again, that's a project that IRF is playing a very, very much a supplementary supportive role in this case through technical support mainly, although there has been some funding support. But that again is a co-management project between Frankfurt Zoological Society and in that case the Zambian government. Long-term project where they built up their rhinos very successfully from a founder group that was put there some years ago. And every year in all our populations, we have to basically audit the rhinos, is to do an exercise to verify the rhinos are all there, to air notch the youngsters with small earmarks that will allow us to identify them as unique animals thereafter and monitor them on an individual basis. So we've got an operation in North Luangwa. I'm normally the pilot on these operations, so I will be flying the spotter plane, which is crucial for coordinating the exercise and for bringing in the helicopter and for helping to find rhinos. And I always like operating in a different environment. North Luangwa is a bit different to Zimbabwe, so it's nice to get out and work with a completely different team of very efficient people doing constructive rhino conservation with room to grow in Zambia.
Raoul, we wish you all the luck in your operations in Zambia and North Luangwa. Please extend our thank you to everyone up there as well that have been putting in long days and long efforts to protect the rhinos in Zambia as well.
Thanks very much, Chris.
And thank you for taking some time today and sharing what's going on in Zimbabwe, as well as how we can continue to grow rhinos both in Zimbabwe and across Africa in the future. Team Rhino, you can be part of these efforts. You can be part of them by making a donation, spreading awareness. Go to rhinos.org and help us celebrate our anniversary by contributing what you can towards our $30,000 goal for this month to help support all of the operations that are going on in Africa as well as around the world. That's rhinos.org. Thank you.